as you can see, I am a wedding dress designer, and I want to take you on my little weaving journey. It's not going to take that long, and I will try and pick out a few highlights which hopefully will be fun and a bit inspiring. So can I ask first of all, anybody here do textiles? Excellent. A lot of my brides ask me how I got into this when I'm scrabbling around on the floor pinning their hems, and I always say that my mum taught me to sew. I come from a family of dressmakers, and we all used to sit at the long dining room table, me and my sister and my mum. I was the one on this machine because I was the youngest and it was the only one that was left. But when I was your age, I did not want to sit at a sewing machine. In fact, when I was at the high school, I half concentrated on my lessons, and the rest of the time I would be at home prancing around my bedroom practicing my catwalk because I was determined that I wanted to be a supermodel. And somehow I managed to persuade my mum with my friend Sarah Jane to go all the way up to London to go and see a model agent to see whether I had what it took. Unfortunately, we discovered that I was tall enough but I didn't have the right bone structure. And while Sarah Jane was extremely pretty, she wasn't tall enough. And in those days, we all had to look the same. This was the 1980s. And I am just deliriously happy for you that this is no longer the case and you can look however you want. But I did actually really want to be rich and famous. That was my main goal in life. So we came home on the train and we kind of needed to come up with another plan. And as the resilient teenagers that we all were back then, and you are now, we decided we'd move on to the next part of the plan, which was to become film stars. So can you imagine the poor careers department at Guildford High School when I rocked up with my mad mix of O-levels, yes I am that old, they hadn't invented GCSEs then, and A-levels, I did English, music and French, and said all I wanted to do was be an actress. So I was persuaded to go to university because I was academically capable and it was considered a better option than going to drama school. It was just going to keep a few more doors open. Really good advice. When I got to university, I met all the other would-be actresses and decided this was a really bad idea. I discovered I had neither the talent nor the drive to be a full-time actress. So I switched my course, did Italian, and went and spent a fantastic year in Italy on the back of fast Italian boys' motorbikes, eating lots of pasta and pizza and ice cream, and came home, got my Italian degree, and realised I was then qualified to do absolutely nothing. Well, I wasn't, but that's how I thought it was. I thought the only job that I'd actually had was as a Saturday job working in a shop. So I walked up and down Guildford High Street, handing in my CV, which didn't have an awful lot on it, and I got a job at Monsoon, the clothes shop, and I absolutely loved it. I was just a sales assistant, I was earning £3 an hour, and I was literally just serving the public, selling dresses. I used to have teachers from the GHS come in and just say, do your parents know you're here, Karen? They've spent all this money on your education and you're literally working in a shop. Well, I loved it, absolutely loved it. I loved being in a team, I loved working with the clothes, unpacking the new collection. I loved everything. I loved working with the public. I loved handling the money, seeing how the business worked. And I really enjoyed standing in a fitting room with somebody who was trying on an outfit and seeing how they felt about how they looked when they looked in the mirror, which to me was completely different to how they actually looked. I saw something totally different, and I thought, this is interesting. So I worked up very quickly through Monsoon, and I was an assistant manager, then a manager, then an area manager. And suddenly I had a nice company car, great salary, brilliant clothing allowance, and a very clear career path where I could just continue working up through management in Monsoon. But I had this little creative itch I wanted to scratch, this sewing thing that had kind of been lurking in the background. Also, I sort of wanted to run my own business. No one else in my family had really done it, but I kind of just out of curiosity thought, I wonder whether I could do it. I wonder whether I could actually manage to support myself, literally from sewing. So somewhere along this little journey, I met a boy in a disco in Guildford, an RGS boy, I think to add, who I fell in love with. We got married and we bought a house in Guildford. And I then had a dining room where I could do fittings and a spare room where I could sew. So I talked to him one evening and I said, how would you feel if I ditched my perfectly well-paid job with this fantastic career path and set up my own business sewing? And he said, yeah, if you want to do it, then, go for it. So bear in mind that I did have the security at this point of the fact that he had a salary. And that is one thing that I am very conscious of. Now, fortunately, the tables have turned because now I have run a successful business for 20 years. Now I have a house husband at home, which is lovely, and I am the breadwinner. However, what I did was I kept one foot in Monsoon. I went back and worked for them as a sales assistant, which everybody that worked for me thought was hilarious, having been in charge of a sort of multi-million-pound budget and hundreds of members of staff. Suddenly, there I was back on the shop floor, and I was being told what to do. I didn't care, and Monsoon paid me a little bit of money for working in the shop, and also I was able to get a steady supply of customers. So people wanted bridesmaids' dresses taken up and that sort of thing. So that was basically how I sort of schlepped from an Italian degree into Monsoon, into suddenly setting up my business and being a dressmaker. So I realised fairly quickly on that I really did need to earn some money, and doing alterations and taking up people's skirts was not going to quite cut it. One day somebody said, could you make a bridesmaid's dress? And I thought, well, that's fine, you know, I've made dresses all my life. So I did, and then somebody said, could you make that bridesmaid's dress but in white, because I want to get married in white and I like the simple style of dress. And I did, I made that dress, and all of a sudden I was a wedding dressmaker. So at that point I hit another wall, and I felt I could see other designers whose dresses were significantly better than my own. So I booked a course at the London College of Fashion for 2 weeks, and I learnt couture bridal wear, and that is the only formal training I've had. I came back and was able to make much better dresses, raise my prices, and then I carried on doing that for a little while, and then sort of hit a bit of a financial wall where I realised, this took me quite a long time to work out, that I had to get some kind of leverage in my business. Otherwise, I was just a freelancer, which is totally fine and wonderful, but these hands will only sew for 24 hours a day. So I needed to find a way of earning money while I slept. So I designed an app, which was a little pick and mix app. I don't know if anybody's looked on my website, but have a look later if you want to. There are a series of bodices and skirts. You can click on a top, click on a skirt, and build your own dress. You could then email that design through to me. I had all of those samples of the bodices and the skirts all made up, so you could come and try them on. You could choose a fabric, and I would have the dress made up in your size and in your choice of fabric. And that's an example of one of the dresses from my app. Really simple. The actual components, when you look at them, are extremely simple, but this was something that at the time nobody else was doing. This went really well, and I tested it out as much as I could, and then I expanded. So I then got a manufacturer, pattern cutters, dressmakers, and most of them were freelance, but it was a way that suddenly I could get my sales consultants who I recruited, who I taught how to put together these outfits for customers. They could literally earn me money while I wasn't sewing. So that seemed really great, until I realised that in actual fact, I wasn't sewing anymore. And the reason I'd left Monsoon was because I wanted to run my own business, but also I wanted to sew. I wanted to scratch the creative itch. I wanted to do the thing that I really loved. So also around this time, a number of things happened. We started a young family, which was great. I had open heart surgery, which wasn't so great. And then COVID hit. So I had to make a change. And again, you just hit these walls and you just have to adapt. So I actually scaled the whole thing back again, just before COVID. And now I make very high-end couture dresses. I do lovely things like this. I've a lot of speaking, and I mentor young designer dressmakers. I am a YouTuber, and I am writing a book. So now I've just moved from one thing onto the next. And I think probably from everybody here this evening, I've seen that we've actually had very similar career paths. I don't know if you've spotted that, but we've all woven around. But one thing I would notice, and I think we probably share this without exception, is none of us have ever been rudderless. And I think this is probably one thing that I would suggest possibly taking away from tonight, that it's very easy to look at a creative career and imagine that somebody's just sort of drifted around. But in actual fact, so long as you keep your hand on the rudder and you make the decisions for good reasons, then it is a wonderful life. Thank you.